The world can be a vast and empty place, a place of such immense scale that it can make a person feel utterly insignificant, a mere speck of dust on an endless canvas of earth and sky. In the heart of the 12th century, the Mongolian steppe was precisely such a place, a land of endless horizons, stretching further than the eye could see, under the silent watch of the eternal blue sky, Tengri. This was a realm of extremes. It was a place of brutal cold, where the winter winds, the eye, swept down from Siberia without mercy, a gale-force blizzard capable of freezing a man solid in minutes and burying entire herds of livestock under mountains of snow. It was a place of unforgiving heat in the summer, where the sun beat down on the treeless plains, cracking the earth. This was a landscape that didn't just shape the people who lived there, it forged them. They were tough, resilient, and pragmatic to their very core. They were nomads. Their homes were not fixed points on a map, but portable sanctuaries of felt and wood called, which could be dismantled and packed onto horses in a matter of hours. They moved with the seasons, a constant cyclical migration, following their herds of horses, sheep, and goats to fresh pastures across the great, silent expanse. Their wealth was not in gold or land, but in the animals that sustained them, providing milk, meat, and hides. Survival was a daily battle, a relentless struggle waged not only against the elements, but against each other. For this was not one nation, but a fractured mosaic of warring tribes and clans. The Tatars, the Merkits, the Naimans, the Karaites, and dozens of others were locked in a perpetual cycle of conflict. Alliances were as fleeting as the morning mist, forged in shared interest and broken by ambition. Raids were a fact of life, sudden and violent clashes not for territory, but for the most valuable resources, horses, livestock, and women. In this harsh, chaotic world, there were no written laws that held sway across the plains. There was no central authority. Strength was the only law that mattered. The power of a chieftain, AA, was measured by his personal charisma, his martial prowess, and his ability to provide for his followers. Weakness was a death sentence, a final, desperate whisper lost to the howling wind. To be weak was to be prey. Into this unforgiving world, a boy was born. But his story does not begin with a prophecy or a crown. It begins with betrayal. His father, Yesugei, was a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, a respected warrior who had managed to carve out a small measure of security for his family. But on a journey home, he shared a meal with a group of Tatars, old enemies. The meal was poisoned. Yesugei died a slow, agonizing death, leaving his wife, Hoilan, and their young children vulnerable. The clan, now led by the rival Taichud family, saw no value in supporting a widow and her brood. In a stunning act of cruelty, they abandoned them. They simply packed their gears, gathered their herds, and rode away, leaving Hoilan and her children alone on the empty steppe, with only a handful of animals and the clothes on their backs. Among those abandoned children was Yesugei's eldest son. A small figure appears against the stark white canvas. He is just a boy, no more than 9 years old, mounted on a sturdy horse, his face a mask of grim determination against the biting cold. His name is Temujin. He is alone, a tiny silhouette against the immense frozen wilderness. He is hunted, not just by the elements, but by the Taichiuds, who fear he might one day seek revenge. He is an outcast. His family has been betrayed, their status, their security, their very identity ripped away from them. Now he must fight for every scrap of food, for every moment of warmth. The family's existence becomes a desperate scramble for survival. They learn to hunt marmots and field mice. They spend hours digging for edible roots with their bare hands, their fingers raw and bleeding from the frozen earth. They fashion hooks from bone to catch the few fish swimming in the icy Onan River. Hunger is a constant companion, a gnawing ache in the pit of their stomachs. But even in this desperate state, the law of the steppe prevails. A dispute over a single fish, a bird caught in a snare, erupts between Temujin and his older half-brother, Begter. Begter, stronger and more domineering, asserts his right to the prize. But Temujin sees this not as a simple squabble, but as a challenge to his future authority. With his brother Kasar, he stalks Begter, and with cold precision, kills him with a volley of arrows. It is a brutal, shocking act, but for Temujin, it is his first harsh lesson in power. To lead, one could not tolerate rivals, not even within one's own family. He learns the bitter lessons of the steppe early. He learns that trust is a rare and fragile commodity, easily broken by fear and self-interest, a lesson taught by the abandonment of his clan. He learns that loyalty, the fierce, unwavering loyalty of his mother Holin and his siblings who endured the hardship with him, is a treasure beyond any price, the bedrock upon which all else must be built. This desolate land is his teacher, and its lessons are not spoken, but carved into his soul with the sharp edge of hardship. The steppe becomes his crucible, burning away all softness, all pity, all weakness, until only a core of tempered steel remains. He has nothing but the worn clothes on his back and a fierce, unyielding will to live burning within his heart. Yet there is something more to him than just a survivor's instinct, a spark in his eyes that refuses to be extinguished by the cold or the hunger. It is the first flicker of a terrifying ambition. He looks out across the vast, empty land that has tried so hard to kill him, and he does not see a prison. He sees a kingdom. He sees the chaos, the endless raiding, the betrayals that cost him his father and his childhood, and a new idea begins to form, a vision of a united people, under one law, one leader. It is the beginning of a legend that will be written in blood and fire across the continents. He was born with nothing. He was given no inheritance, no title, no great destiny laid out before him by the gods. He was a forgotten son of a minor chieftain, an outcast left to starve. This young boy, this survivor, was not born to be another victim of the steppe. He was born to master it. He was not born to be ruled by the chaos of others. He was born to rule them all. He was born with nothing, but destined to rule everything. The scattered tribes of the Mongolian plateau were a fractured people, a whirlwind of shifting alliances under an endless blue sky. For centuries, this vast, unforgiving land had known only division. Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, Karaits, countless clans and tribes bound by a common language and a shared hardship, yet divided by blood feuds that spanned generations. Life was a brutal calculus of survival. Alliances were sworn in blood and broken by ambition. For centuries, they had raided each other in the dead of night, a chaotic dance of fire and steel. They fought over precious grazing lands, the lifeblood of their herds. They stole women to bear their children and horses to carry them into the next battle. It was a self-consuming cycle of violence, a fire that fed on its own people. Individually, they were masters of their world. Born in the saddle, a Mongol warrior was more comfortable on horseback than on his own 2 feet. His composite bow, a marvel of horn, sinew, and wood, could send an arrow through armor at 300 paces. They were skilled horsemen, deadly archers, a nomadic cavalry unlike any the world had ever seen. Yet their power was divided, their incredible strength turned inward. They were a weapon aimed at their own heart, a people waiting for a purpose, a force of nature waiting to be unleashed. Into this chaos, a boy named Temujin was born, clutching a blood clot in his fist, a sign, the shaman said, of a great destiny. His father, Yasuge, was a minor clan chief, a respected warrior. But on the steppe, respect is a fragile shield. While escorting his young son, Yasuge was poisoned by rival Tatars, a slow, agonizing death that shattered his family's world. With their leader gone, their clan abandoned them. Yasuge's widows and children were cast out, left to perish in the wilderness. The descent from nobility to the lowest rung of society was swift and brutal. They survived on wild roots and the few fish they could catch. Young Temujin learned the bitter taste of hunger, the sting of betrayal, and the cold reality of power. He learned that to survive, one must be harder than the frozen earth. This lesson was sealed in blood when, in a dispute over food, he and his brother Kassar killed their older half-brother, Bektar. It was a grim, desperate act, but for Temujin, it was a declaration. He would never again allow anyone to take what was his. Hardship did not break him. It forged him harder than steel. As Temujin grew into a man, his resilience began to attract notice. He endured capture and enslavement by the very clan that had abandoned him, only to escape with a quiet, chilling determination. When his new wife, Birda, was kidnapped by the Merkit tribe, Temujin refused to accept her loss. He sought help from his father's old ally, Togrul, and from his own sworn brother, a charismatic young leader named Jamuka. Together, they crushed the Merkits and rescued Birda. This victory announced the arrival of a new player on the steppe. He began to gather followers, other outcasts, disenfranchised warriors, and men who saw in his unyielding spirit a reflection of their own hopes for a different future. He learned to fight not just with brute force, but with a cunning mind that saw patterns in the chaos. He understood the hearts of his people, their desires for security, justice, and glory. But his vision clashed with the old ways, embodied by his friend Jamuka. Where Jamuka believed in the rigid hierarchy of aristocratic birthright, Temujin promoted men based on skill and loyalty alone. A common shepherd could become a general in Temujin's camp, an idea that was both revolutionary and threatening to the established order. The two friends, once as close as brothers, began to drift apart, their camps representing two opposing futures for the Mongol people. His reputation started to spread across the grasslands, carried on the wind, whispered in the yurts of chieftains. They spoke of his tactical brilliance, the feigned retreats, the disciplined formations, the psychological warfare that broke an enemy's will before the first arrow flew. But they also spoke of his revolutionary new order. He decreed that plunder would be distributed centrally and fairly amongst all his warriors, not kept by the first to grab it. This ensured the loyalty of his entire army. They spoke of his generosity to the loyal and his terrifying absolute ruthlessness to traitors and enemies who resisted. He systematically destroyed the Tatars who had poisoned his father. He turned on and defeated his former patron, Togrul Khan. One by one, the old tribes fell before his growing army. The final obstacle was Jamuka, who had rallied all of Temujin's remaining rivals into a grand coalition. The clash between the two former friends was the final bloody act in the long drama of unification. In 1206, after years of brutal warfare, Temujin stood victorious. His childhood friend and greatest rival was delivered to him by his own men. Temujin, honoring their bond, granted Jamuka a noble's death, without the shedding of blood. With all opposition crushed, he called a grand assembly of all the tribes on the banks of the Onan River. A sea of yurts and banners stretched to the horizon. For the first time in history, the people of the felt-walled tents were gathered as one nation. There, the chieftains and commanders, the men he had raised from nothing, honored him with the ancient ritual. They raised him up on a great white felt mat, proclaiming him their undisputed ruler. The outcast boy, the forgotten son, was now the supreme ruler of all the peoples of the steppe. The great shaman, Kokochu, bestowed upon him a new name, a title of power and destiny, Genghis Khan. The oceanic ruler, the Khan of Khans, universal sovereign of a newly born empire. The ground seemed to tremble with something immense. A new era was dawning. In the heart of Asia, a storm was rising. Not a storm of wind and snow, but a storm of men, disciplined, unified, and loyal to one man's vision. A storm that would spill out from the steppes and swallow the world. The unification was complete. The weapon had been forged. But for a man destined to rule everything, this was only the beginning. The world did not yet know his name, but it would learn to tremble at its sound. Genghis Khan's gaze turned southward. He was not planning a simple raid. He was planning a conquest. But the nomads of the steppe now faced a new kind of enemy: fortified cities. They learned quickly, capturing engineers and forcing them to build the tools of siege. What they could not overcome with force, they took with terror. Cities that surrendered were spared. Those that resisted were annihilated, their people used as human shields in the next assault. While war raged in China, Genghis Khan sought trade with the powerful Khwarezmian Empire to the west. But his caravan was seized and its merchants executed. When the Shah murdered the Khan's envoy, he sealed the fate of his empire. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. Enraged, Genghis Khan turned his entire army westward for a war of pure vengeance. In a daring maneuver, he led an elite force across the Kizilkum Desert, appearing from nowhere deep within the enemy's heartland. The great cities of the Silk Road, Bukhara, Samarkand, fell one by one. The campaign was a whirlwind of destruction. His name became fear itself: Genghis Khan. His generals rode to the edges of Europe, scouting the lands for future conquest. The storm born on the steppe had now broken upon the world. From the ashes of smoldering cities, an unexpected reality emerged: the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. For the first time, a single power controlled the vast expanse from the Pacific to Europe. The very terror the Mongols inspired in war became the foundation for an unprecedented era of stability. Genghis Khan knew an empire needed commerce, not just plunder. He secured the Silk Road, eradicating the bandits that had preyed on it for centuries. He established the Yam, a revolutionary postal relay system. A network of stations with fresh horses allowed messengers and merchants to traverse the empire with astonishing speed and safety. Under Mongol protection, the routes flourished. Silk, spices, and porcelain traveled west. Glass and gold flowed east. But the most transformative cargo was intangible. Gunpowder, the compass, and printing technology migrated from China to Europe, altering history. It was the world's first truly globalized network, built on one man's will. This paradox defined his reign. He was a destroyer of worlds, but also a builder. To govern his multi-ethnic empire, he relied on a pragmatic code of law, the Yasa. It demanded absolute loyalty and forbade theft, but also established a society based on merit, not birthright. He promoted generals on skill alone. Furthermore, Genghis decreed universal religious freedom. While a Tengrist himself, he invited Christian, Muslim, and Buddhist leaders to his court, exempting their clergy from taxes. He understood a stable empire could not be built by forcing conquered peoples to abandon their gods. But the conqueror was mortal. In 1227, during his final campaign against the Tangut Kingdom, the Great Khan's life ended at 65. The cause is one of history's great mysteries, deliberately obscured. Official histories cite an injury from a fall during a hunt. Other accounts speculate he succumbed to typhus, or was even assassinated. The truth was buried, shrouded in legend to prevent instability upon his demise. His death was a state secret, as his body was returned to Mongolia. The funeral procession was a terrifying affair. Legend claims the guard killed every person and animal on their path to ensure the grave's location remained unknown. His tomb was prepared in secret near the sacred mountain of Burkhan Khaldun. It is said a river was diverted to flow over his grave, and 1,000 horsemen trampled the ground to erase any trace. The man who conquered the world wanted to vanish back into the earth, his spirit returning to the eternal blue sky. But his legacy was not buried with him. Genghis had planned his succession, dividing the empire into 4 khanates for his sons' lines: the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ilkhanate, and the Great Khanate in the east. His chosen successor, his 3rd son Ogedei, became the new Great Khan. Far from collapsing, the Mongol war machine thundered on for decades, with his sons and grandsons pushing into Russia, Poland, and the heart of the Middle East, expanding the empire to its farthest reaches. From a hunted outcast, he rose to become the ruler of the known world. His journey a testament to the power of a single, unrelenting will. He was a destroyer and a creator, a tyrant and a visionary. He was an illiterate nomad who commissioned a written script and a code of law. He presided over the slaughter of millions, yet enforced a peace that connected civilizations. He tore down walls between cultures and, through a river of blood, created a new era of global connection. The boy who was born with nothing truly did rule everything. His was a storm that swept out of the heart of Asia and reshaped the world.